What if the most damaging moment of Angel Reese's night wasn't something Caitlin Clark said, a referee's whistle, or even the final score? What if it was what happened immediately afterward, when the cameras turned toward Atlanta's bench and eventually toward the coach? Because the Atlanta Dream didn't just lose to the Indiana Fever. They had the game sitting right there in front of them. The score was tied. The final possession was theirs. One basket could have ended the whole thing. And after an offensive rebound put Angel Reese in exactly the kind of position every player dreams about, Atlanta still couldn't finish. Then overtime happened. And suddenly, a game that looked like it belonged to Atlanta became another Indiana comeback story. The Fever walked out of Atlanta with a 95-91 overtime victory, their fourth straight win, while Caitlin Clark finished with 26 points and 9 assists. Reese, despite the late miss becoming the headline, actually put together a strong all-around statistical night, with 15 points, 14 rebounds, and 6 assists. That distinction matters, because the real story isn't that Reese suddenly forgot how to play basketball. It's that one possession exposed a much bigger problem for the Dream, and their own coach's comments afterward made that problem impossible to ignore. And then there was the clip, the one that spread everywhere. Reese is visibly frustrated after the missed opportunity. Clark is caught walking nearby with a smile on her face. Within minutes, fans were turning that tiny moment into another chapter of the rivalry that has followed these two players from college into the WNBA. Some fans saw Clark simply reacting to an unbelievable sequence. Others saw something much more personal. But before deciding what that smile meant, you have to understand how the game got there. Because Atlanta had already been warned. The Dream entered this matchup knowing exactly what was at stake. This wasn't some meaningless August game where both teams could shrug off a loss and move on. The Fever and Dream were fighting around the playoff picture, and Indiana's victory strengthened its position for home court advantage. The margin between these teams was small enough that one possession could change the entire conversation around the standings, and Atlanta had every opportunity to make that possession theirs. For most of regulation, the Dream looked capable of doing exactly that. They battled Indiana physically. They attacked the glass. They made life difficult around the basket. And Reese, as she has done throughout her career, kept giving Atlanta second chances. That's the part that gets lost when social media reduces an entire performance to one missed shot. Reese wasn't invisible. She wasn't sitting on the perimeter doing nothing. She was grabbing rebounds, making plays, and helping Atlanta stay in the fight. But basketball has a cruel way of turning an entire game into one moment. With the score tied, what if Angel Reese's missed layup wasn't actually the biggest reason Atlanta lost? Because the moment everybody is talking about happened with the game tied, the clock nearly gone, and the Dream just one basket away from ending the entire night. Reese got the offensive rebound. She had another chance. And when that shot didn't fall, Atlanta suddenly had to survive overtime. But here's what makes this loss so much more interesting. Reese wasn't having some terrible game. She finished with 15 points and 14 rebounds. The problem was that Atlanta reached the final possession with almost no margin for error, and then everything unraveled. The Dream had built a 72-64 lead after 3 quarters. They were 8 minutes away from another huge win over Indiana. Instead, the Fever outscored them 17-9 in the fourth quarter and forced overtime. That is where the story really begins. Because when a team gives away an 8-point lead in the final quarter, blaming the final missed shot is way too easy. The cracks were already there. Atlanta's offense had started to slow down. Indiana's defense was making every possession harder. And when the Dream needed movement the most, the offense became increasingly dependent on individual creation. Still, Atlanta had one last opportunity. Kelsey Mitchell tied the game at 81, with a three-pointer with just over a minute remaining. Then the Fever got the stop they needed. Atlanta had the final possession. Ryan Howard took the first shot. Missed. But the play wasn't over. Reese grabbed the offensive rebound. For a split second, Atlanta had exactly what it wanted. A second chance. One finish could win the game. Instead, Reese couldn't convert. And before Atlanta could recover, Naz Hillman got another opportunity. That missed too. 3 chances. 0 points. Overtime. That's the part the box score can't fully explain. Atlanta didn't just miss a shot. It missed 3 opportunities to end the game. And now Indiana had 5 extra minutes to punish them. The Fever didn't waste them. Caitlin Clark finished with 26 points and 9 assists. But she wasn't the only reason Indiana survived. Kelsey Mitchell scored 20. Makayla Timpson exploded for a career-high 20. And 6 of Timpson's points came in overtime. Suddenly, Indiana had the momentum. Atlanta had the pressure. And the player, who had just missed the potential game winner, wasn't the only person under the microscope. Because the cameras caught Clark nearby, Reese was visibly frustrated. Clark appeared to smile. That was all the internet needed. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. Some fans interpreted it as Clark laughing at Reese. Others thought it was simply a reaction to an unbelievable sequence. The truth is, nobody watching that clip can know exactly what was in Clark's head. But everyone knows the history between these two. That's why one smile can become a national conversation. The rivalry began years ago, long BF. But then the game stopped being just another loss. Because once the final buzzer sounded, the basketball conversation immediately became a rivalry conversation. Angel Reese had missed the opportunity to win it. Caitlin Clark had just helped Indiana survive overtime. And then cameras caught Clark smiling near Reese. That tiny moment was enough to send social media into another frenzy. Some fans saw it as Clark laughing at Reese. Others argued that nobody could possibly know what Clark was thinking from one facial expression. And that second point matters. We can describe what the cameras showed. We can talk about how fans interpreted it. But we can't pretend we know someone's private thoughts. The reason the clip exploded wasn't because a smile is automatically controversial. It exploded because these two players have been connected for years. Their rivalry existed before the WNBA. Their college careers turned them into two of the most recognizable players of their generation. And every time they meet now, the audience brings all that history with them. So when one player is frustrated after a missed opportunity and the other is captured smiling nearby, the internet doesn't see an isolated moment. It sees another chapter. That's why the clip traveled so quickly. But there is something much more important underneath all that noise. Indiana didn't win because Clark smiled. Atlanta didn't lose because Clark reacted. The Fever won because they executed when the game became tight. And that's the part Atlanta should actually be worried about. Because this wasn't a game where Indiana dominated from the opening tip. The Dream had an 8-point lead entering the fourth quarter. They had opportunities to close. They had 3 chances on the final possession. They had the offensive rebound. They had the ball. They simply couldn't finish the job. And when overtime arrived, Indiana looked more organized. Clark finished with 26 points and 9 assists. Kelsey Mitchell reached 20 points again, extending her remarkable streak to 19 consecutive games with at least 20. Then Makayla Timpson delivered perhaps the biggest surprise of the night.